Well, hey, hi, hello, you all. I'm so happy to be visiting with you again. Today, I have a friend and cohort in the outdoor industry and advocacy for hunting and all things outdoors that I wanted to share with you. And I have a ton of questions for her, and some of them are some that you all have sent in. So I'm happy to have her here to just kind of dive in with us. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Jennifer Burbey, who is the president of the Colorado Outfitters Association. Jenny, will you say hello and just kind of give a little background to my audience?
Sure. And sorry for the bell. I had the classic cell phone issue. Um, but I'm Jenny Burbey. I have been outfitting and guiding and packing since my late teens. And my husband and I have owned our permit and outfitting business for this is our 32nd season and have been involved with the State Outfitters Association the majority of that time. Certainly in the last decade or more heavily. And then in the last 4 years, I have been the president. And outfitting in Colorado is simplistic and complex, meaning it's actually a simple thing to receive a license. If you can designate that you have a land base and you have a business entity, liability insurance, you can get your license and it processes relatively quickly. If you are wanting to operate on federal lands, there's far bigger halos of fire to jump through. The majority of those are buying somebody else's permit because most of the areas are at or above capacity as far as what the federal lands managers believe is necessary for commercial operations.
Yeah. And so,
Um,
talking about what is available on federal lands, that's something that some of my listeners might not know that the regulation that goes behind outfitting. But before we get to that, the regulations,
sure.
what made you decide to become an outfitter?
This summer, whether at the range or in the field, WSI Sports Hypertech bamboo tanks, tees, and leggings will have you covered. Visit WSISports.com to support the show and use the affiliate code MACO10 for 10% off your purchase. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI is bringing back pride in America-made clothing. Again, that code is MACO10 for 10% off your order at WSISports.com.
How'd you get started? It's been so long ago, I know.
No, it actually for me personally, it was a really simple thing. I grew up being outdoorsy. It's what I wanted to do. I'm a freaking horse crazy nut who is the little girl who did anything and everything to ride. Would go to my grandparents' place every summer only because they had horses, not even necessarily because I liked them so much. It was because they had horses and that's what I wanted to do. And I would do anything to do that. And then I find myself in San Miguel County and there was sleigh ride operation that was looking for somebody and a trail ride operation that was looking for somebody. And it's like August, it's the first week of August. And I walked in and I'm like, hey, I've got my saddle and literally had a job like within 24 hours, like show up tomorrow. I have zero idea what I was doing. I'd never run a trail ride. I didn't know any of that kind of stuff. I just rode and I liked it. And as we kind of moved in later and finished out that month and went into archery season, the my boss, and this is kind of funny because it's timely with all of the equity and inclusion and everything. I'm an 18-year-old, 19-year-old girl, and he goes, well, hunting season's coming on, and I want to keep you employed because you're a good worker, but I don't bring girls into camp. He had three daughters. He was not sexist. He just was like, he was the type and generation that he wanted to protect me from people being rough or maybe cussing. He would kick people off trail rides if they said a four-letter word. He was just very succinct. And he was like, I don't let girls in. And I wasn't even, if I was too young, one, to be offended, but I also was just it felt fatherly, I guess. And so he kept me out. I did all the grocery shopping. I did the airport runs to Montrose. I did this and that. And like the second week, he goes, "You're the only one who knows the stock. Do you have a sleeping bag? And would you camp?" And I went, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And showed up at the trailhead, went into my first archery hunting camp, and wrangled for him and started packing. And here I am, still basically doing the same things, just with more levels to the job. Um,
Now you're kind of in his shoes, running the business and managing everything and more.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And now, I mean, at this point in time, really fighting for the future of hunting in Colorado.
Yeah, and that's when I introduced you and I said in advocating, that's the thing is Jenny actually won an award from SCI from the Four Corners chapter for her commitment to conservation. And it some people don't think that's a big deal, but I think it's a huge deal because she's done so much in Colorado. And actually you work with the Professional Outfitter and Guide Association as well. So not just in our state. And the advocacy is super important because we're going to be losing a lot of things. And currently, the outfitting industry in Colorado looks like it might be facing a huge attack. And that's something that, as I said, with the federal lands, we will talk about that as well. But I forward people to you all the time, and I think some people don't understand what an outfitter is and what your role is in hunting. So can you kind of let people know that to get started? Like what do the outfitters do?
So the very first thing, the regulatory part of what we do is provide services that are part of, in conjunction with, transporting, trying to harvest, or services that encourage people to do so. So are in a consumptive manner, whether that be fishing or hunting. And any outfitter that has anything to do with wildlife or services that are making it not easier necessarily, but that are transporting people and gear, providing food, providing guiding services, providing transportation of game. Those all, by state and federal regulation, require permitting and licensing. The big thing in Colorado specifically, and it actually is happening Intermountain West, but definitely in Colorado, is that our population has grown so large that there are lots, especially federally, there's so much pressure on generalized resource, be that fauna, flora, or dirt, general trailheads, water systems, that the commercial they have, that the agencies believe is necessary to fill. That's at capacity. There's an overwhelming capacity of people going, we want to do that. We want more of it. And they're saying, no, we don't have enough room. It's putting too much pressure on the resource. And so what that's done is kind of sometimes formally and informally put moratoriums on. There's the businesses that are there, and that's what there is.
You can't have any more.
Not many more. There's very
the outfitters, few... as an outfitter, you guys are also helping manage the resource, aren't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So like with Forest Service and BLM, they consider us, even in their like workbooks and stuff, we're their partners. We're not an arm, like we're paid by them, but we are an arm. They expect certain things. We're answerable. They know where our camps are going to be. They say yes that our camps can be there. They say yes, how many days they can be used, when they can be used, for what usages, what services can be provided. That's all lined out in permit. On the kind of backside that is not necessarily formalized is the reality that because we have to we have a camp we have to be in at a certain time providing a certain service, we have to get there. And in these funding times that are all over the place, everything's expensive, Forest Service and BLM are going through a time where they don't have the funding and they don't have the personnel to get all of their own even mandates completed. So a lot of the trail work that you want to go fishing on the weekend and you go out to your local trailhead and hike up or ride in on a horse or mount, whatever access there is. A lot of those, in some districts, the majority of those are cleared by the outfitter who has a camp that is accessed from those trailheads and those trails. And
Yeah.
we pick up trash when we're going by because we're going to get blamed for it, whether it was ours or not. So we're going to pick it up. We're going to clean it up. We're going to give out information at trailheads. We're going to meet people on the trail and interact with a lot of public. We're first on site oftentimes for rescues, transportation, evacuation plans, fire mitigation reporting, all of those things. Those kind of fall in our bailiwick because we need to do that to provide our services to the clients we have.
Yeah. And with all of that, that alone is a lot of work and it's super time consuming. I know you guys do a lot of labor out there, but if I was wanting to book a hunt, there's been the trend for probably the past decade is the DIY hunter, do it yourself. And not everybody can do it themselves or has done it themselves. So what would be the benefit of enlisting an outfitter?
Twofold. The first one is the local knowledge is irreplaceable. The reality is that the outfitters, our guides and our packers are living in those areas. We are going there on a regular basis, whether it's to clear the trail, pack trash, do trips. The local knowledge is first and foremost. Because of the transportation factor, especially on the public land side, we can get people farther in a much more efficient manner. And we take a lot of that work and energy out of the process that allow people, especially hunting, you're going to have more energy to hunt. You don't have to, okay, I'm going to be cheeky, but you don't have to bring in your daughter's barrel horse that doesn't really go to the woods and you bring them up there. They're fine to ride. They do a fine job. You get in, you spend hours a day making sure that this horse is getting water, getting feed, highlining, which they don't do all the time, getting off, not liking bugs, liking bugs, all of those things, all to go, hey, guess what? There was this weather system that came through last week that you were working and missed it and didn't know that it does this to the game when that happens. We kind of fill those voids. We get people in farther. We take a lot of the work out of the process, and we have the local knowledge to pass on to make everybody have more energy and hopefully more success because of that.
Something that I always use as an example is that when we were guiding full time, I would go on guided hunts in other states. And one of my editors said, "Why would you go on a guided hunt? You are a guide." And something that's a big deal to me is I don't have time to go to Arizona to scout and learn all this stuff, And so I'm going to pay someone else to do the scouting and help me so that I don't have to show up and just start at ground zero. And so to me, that was a big advantage of enlisting an outfitter or a guide. So that's something that I think is hugely important.
No, the local knowledge and the passing of that is the passing on of that. To me, it's the same thing when I go somewhere else. I'm not, even if it's as simple as, hey, I've e-scouted this drainage. Onyx says this. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the chat rooms. I've got all this chitter chatter. I know what I want to do, but that Hillary storm just goes through, and we had these weird easterly winds. And when something like that comes in, it changes access because of what the thermals are doing. And if you're not on the ground and know that's what goes on, you don't recognize that maybe you have to completely change up your tactics to getting into a basin you're thinking about working because the weather's weird. And you need somebody to tell you that, because you walk into it going, this is what it is, this is what it is, bam, it's totally opposite of that. You've blown the whole basin, and now you have 3 more days of scouting to catch up to what you just missed, where it was a 10-minute conversation.
So for my listeners, explain what you mean by they blew the basin.
Um, I'm going to assume that we're all hunters here, and we
I
all
have a lot of
have.
listeners that are not hunters, but a lot that want to be
Okay,
hunters.
so my experience is, you can get away with a lot if you have the wind as your friend,
Yes.
and you can blow a bunch of stuff by just having a gust go the wrong way. And that can be an entire basin that, as the crow flies, is, 3/4 of a mile across, just because you got winded. And that can happen because you have a front that's coming or going, and it's making the winds swirl. It's affecting the thermals because the temperatures are off. A big warm front came in front. Various things will change it off. But as soon as that happens, the animals go, uh-oh, Jenny, the predator's here. We're out. And if, like, from the outfitter and guide stance, my husband calls it the back door. He's going to know what the back door is and various ins and outs that those animals may use. And he can use that tactically to cut them off. Where when you're not as comfortable with the terrain, you're literally not going to know that. And you're going to possibly be blowing more than you're gaining just because Hillary came through and we had really weird easterlies that we don't get. They don't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. Very rarely. And so
Yeah.
something, I mean, I'm thinking of all kinds of crazy things that I've seen when I've been out hunting that people who are DIY hunters that they do when they're out there. Can you think of something specific that you've seen when you're out there that you're like, oh, that somebody did that they could have done better?
I think the biggest thing, so where we operate, it's very heavily timbered, and it's relatively well, you can scout it pretty well with all of the information out there. That's whether that's Google Earth, whether that's Onyx, whether there's a lot of systems to get a lot of information. And what we see is that a lot of the do-it-yourselfers are actually doing really good scouting like that. But what's happening is they're going in and trying to set camps literally where the game's living, instead of going, I'm going to be out here and go in, like, I'm going to meet them for coffee in the morning. Because they go in and there's no way of them recognizing that they're moving into the game studio apartment.
Right.
And the game, and that could be even non-hunters. So non-hunters don't get off the beaten path quite as much. So their pressure is differing. But where a hunter with a hunter's ideals, purview, and trying to be tactical, and kind of lacking a little bit of that on the ground, day-to-day kind of knowledge, they set up right in the midst of things.
Yeah. And it's so funny that you say that, because that's specifically what I was picturing. Like when I just said, I'm thinking of instances.
Yeah.
A tent right in the middle of where they come out at dusk. I'm like
20 feet from a wallow. And I'm not to be rude to the people, but 20 feet from a wallow. And they're also using the wallow as their water source.
Yeah.
To each his own. There's great filters out there, but literally it would be, these animals aren't dumb. And I think that that's part of it, is that, and we all do that occasionally. Everybody's human. We all make mistakes. But I think we get, especially as hunters, we get so excited often that we kind of go on that we go on that buzz and set ourselves up where it's like, no, this is perfect. We're never going to see anything here because we just sent them into the next drainage, and they'll be back next week when we leave.
Right.
They're not dumb. They think we're trying to kill them.
They do think we're trying to kill them.
It's weird.
So interesting how that happens. That's too funny. So if I was a hunter and I was wanting to book a hunt, what would I do? Like, what would be my process for selecting an outfitter? Because I always just refer them to the Outfitters Association, and I say to you, but I don't know if they go to you or to Leah, or who they go to.
They usually go to the office. I get enough phone time, so they usually go to the office, which is great. That really is my first, when I'm going somewhere else, my first go-to. If I don't have a direct connection to somebody I know, hey, you do this where I want to go, I'm going to go to a state association and start shopping there. I'm going to have, I think the hardest thing about hunting or about shopping for a hunt specifically is a hunter filtering what their dream is. You know, what's in their mind eye that they want to do. Is that is that a Colorado backcountry elk hunt on horseback with crosscut saws and no cell phone service and no showers and old school lights are out, we're asleep, we're getting up before day. Like, I don't know. Is it we want 5-star meal, my spouse is going to come with me, but they don't want to hunt and they want to have a spa day while I'm out. Like, really kind of sussing all of that out down to even there's so much out there about videos and podcasts and stuff that give people these ideas in their mind that they want to do. And when we are communicating both as client and outfitter, sometimes finding that common ground is a little bit difficult. We had a fellow that booked with us, great guy, shows up day 2. He's like, I had a migraine for 24 hours. It's awful. He feels terrible. And he looks at me and he goes, I'm allergic to canvas. And okay, honestly, my first thought was, can you be allergic to canvas?
That's what I just thought.
No idea. But then I thought about it and I realized I say wall tent all the time. I don't necessarily did not, yes, I'm a little better now. I didn't necessarily say canvas wall tents. So if that's what's triggering his migraine, I'm a little stuck about how to fix this. I ultimately literally rode out and went and brought a backpacker tent in. And by the way, he needed like a 6-pack of Pepsi before noon every day. That helped too.
See, and I thought you were going to say altitude sickness with the headache.
No, it was literally it was just opening up communication enough that you make sure you're talking about the same things.
Yeah.
And when you're as customers, when they're shopping, they have to be real comfortable explaining what it is they're saying so that the outfitter really gets the opportunity to say, yes, I have that, or no, I don't. Had this fellow and I had the conversation when he was booking about, we talked about guides, we talked about physical abilities, riding abilities. We talked about shot placement, range. We talked about a lot of stuff. I never said canvas tents.
Mm-hmm.
He never said, hey, by the way, I decided on Wednesday that I'm kicking my like huge Pepsi addiction cold turkey. And then I'm coming into camp, but while we figure that out, I'm like, okay, we can fix some of these things.
Yeah.
We'll feel better. It'll be great. He killed a really nice 6x6. But his first couple days totally sucked because I never said canvas and he never said Pepsi.
Yeah.
So those types of things, being really open about that, when you're watching movies on or videos on Versus or Outdoor Channel or whatever, and you're seeing these guided trips and the hunt is always in shale and an avalanche chute or big giant parks and there's not a bush. And then you show up at a hunt and it's all dark timber. It's in the sage and it doesn't fit that picture. That can be fine, but it also can be disappointing. And there's something to relearn in those moments. And those are difficult. So really opening up about that when you're talking to outfitters, talking to associations, going, this is what I expect. And lining it out to a lot of levels so that you can find that.
How do you think, technology has changed hunting for somebody who wants to do it themselves, but how do you think it's changed as far as interacting and the booking process? Because I know some outfitters offer like online booking. How has that evolved, and what kind of things do you see maybe that people should do differently? And before you answer that, just to preface, I actually wrote it's a workbook about like 101 questions to ask when booking a guided hunt. And so there's a lot of things to do, but communication is the biggest thing. And so with technology, what are you seeing?
It's changed so much. I mean, we all know that. Like we, well, we bought our permit the year that the internet started. We, a few years later, with the Outfitters Association and a group of outfitters, um, got a consultant to come in and build everybody websites. And we literally, well, you can see that little phone behind me. It's not hooked to anything anymore, but I keep it because it's nostalgic.
It's cool.
But we would get, in that day, it was phones, hunting shows, brochure sales, buying mailing lists, sending stuff out, and written articles, ads, stuff like that too. And then as the internet came in and you had websites, literally in the beginning, someone somewhere in the great computer in the sky would go, "Hey, you got an inquiry on your email." Okay, I have an email. What's that? They would print it off, put it in an envelope, send it through the mail. It would show up in my mailbox. You open it up. You would write a handwritten letter, put in a brochure, maybe a picture or two, this or that, put it back, stamp, send it away, and it would somehow find you with a phone call in the next few weeks, if that's what they were interested in. And now, like literally, so we work wilderness. It's very remote. At our trailhead, we can run a generator because it's not in the wilderness. And literally now we are shipping in a Starlink so that at night we can check emails. We have InReach GPS so that people can text us both for emergency and otherwise. Because as the years have gone on and there isn't cell phone capability or technology capability because of wilderness protocols, that level of communication need and want has upped every year. It's okay. If there's an emergency, you can either call our home number, and this is the process it will go through to get to us and get to your family member. Or you call the Forest Service and it goes through this. That doesn't fly anymore. You have to have more connectivity and more ability to talk to each other. Where at the same time, personally, especially on the wilderness stuff, I go, it's so nice to just turn it all off and experience that time, and concentrate on what we're all supposed to be being there for, which is enjoying the event that is the hunt and the process of the hunt. Not having to hopefully worry about home and work and this and that. But technology has, I think, tainted it. But it is. It's just part of it. But I'm getting enough gray hair that's just kind of the way I'm going. I'm becoming one of the codgers. At the same time that you still have to keep your foot in and go, okay, I'm going to carry, I'm going to carry myself. We got a cell phone in the late 90s and we carried it around, but a big old 16 plus hand mule. And I carried my cell phone around till we found out the 3 places that we can get up to get 1 bar of signal and maybe get a call out.
Yeah. Have you seen an advancement in the places where you can get a signal?
Not for us, which is a blessing and a curse. Not for us, but the advancements, satellite phones, the InReach texting is a phenomenal tool for a lot of things. So some of it is beneficial. But like I said, I'm kind of old school, and it's kind of nice to what's going on that day, and that is what you're focusing on. So that having those distractions cut out are a hidden benefit in a lot of it.
Yeah, but I'm with you in that. I love disconnecting and just take that vacation from the world.
Yeah, no, it's very good for our souls, and it's a necessary. For me, it's a necessary, and I know that it's a necessary for some. But there's others. We've got private land hunters of ours and of our peers that they cannot be, for work or family obligations or whatever. They cannot be out of communication. So there's something out there for everyone. But it's personally, I'm still old school. I'm like, it's nice to just shut it down. I'll talk to you in a week.
Yeah. And so thinking of that, I generally think of, hunting up in the wilderness for elk, because that's to me, it seems like that's many people's dreams. but you just mentioned the private land. And so what kind of differences in camps and differences in hunts do you guys, I mean, not just you, but can a
Yeah.
hunter expect when they're asking the questions?
Well, private lands, the scope of outfitting services is so broad, really. It can be everything from um, a trespass hunt, where literally you may not ever even physically face to face talk to a landowner. You get an access code or code to a gate or a key mail to you or somebody that meets you at a certain ingress and egress, and they let you in and out. Um, and you hunt their land. Whether you harvest or not is up to you. And then obviously you're going to report that to the landowner. But and then you've taken care of all of your own everything except for the trespass fee and the ability to hunt there privately. To kind of touched on earlier, the 5-star resort with spa on the side and a hot tub every night and fancy meals and
we actually just
turn
did
down
horseback
service.
rides yesterday for a group like that. Like,
Yeah, turn down
the husbands
services.
hunted and the wives were getting massages, and then they went on horseback ride, and then they were going to the hot springs.
Yep. No, I did a trip in BC just before COVID, actually. And I was like, okay, we're gonna ride. And wait, you did massages too? Hang on, maybe I'll scope an afternoon. And like there's all of those things that are available that are more often available in the private land because it's more facility oriented. Not that there's not really fancy stuff in wilderness as well. There's just levels of it that change.
Right.
But you can get everything from the fancy meals and chefs and all of that to, hey, it's heated up beans and weenies, or you're doing it on your own, and those both come private land and public. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
The scope of services is actually kind of fascinating to me when you really scratch and look around, because almost anything that you can dream up that you want to do and how you want to do it is available.
It's available. And do you have a lot of people when they're looking for hunts, do they just email you, or do you right away try to do phone?
More often than not, my personal experience is the first go is email. And literally, if you're as an operator, if you're disciplined about checking your emails, you're going to be catching that client relatively soon to when they were looking at your website or seeing where you were brought up in a chat or referred to or social media, however they find you and find your connection. You discipline yourself, check them in the morning, check them at lunch, and check them in the evening. And calling them back right away is a really good way to connect. And hopefully you're catching them at a time that that's what they're thinking about. Oftentimes they're at work.
They're at work and they're like, can't talk now.
Yeah, I'll call you back later. Okay.
We won't tell your boss. So some of the people that I've forwarded to you, I've worked with and explained to them in Colorado how hunting units work and what over the counter is and stuff like that, which could potentially be going away in the future. So we won't have to talk about that as much. But when somebody reaches out to you, is that something they could expect, is for you to work with them on figuring out what unit or how many points they need to have and that kind of stuff in their applications?
Yes. So as an association, when we get an inquiry, first of all, generally it'll be the office. Sometimes an outfitter will get it and then send it into the office. But if it's something that they don't have, but we're going to ask the normal questions that we're going to ask. Well, what are you looking to hunt? How are you looking to hunt it? When are you looking to hunt it? How big is your group? Kind of getting those, starting to build the thought of those dreams. Do you have preference points? Are you looking for over the counter? Are you looking for landowner vouchers? Any of those pieces. And we can either, the things that are sortable within our database, we will target that inquiry to those specifics. I'm only looking for private land. Well, we're not going to send it out to the only public lands operators. We're going to send that out to our private lands operators. And then the kind of clearing that out to everybody in the membership. And then the membership goes, hey, I've got that opening. I'll offer this, I'll offer that. And then they can take it over and reach out. And it's still, even that level of shopping, the more detail that they can give any of us, whether we're individual outfitters referring to another one, referring to the association, or just in general looking, the more they can help flesh out that dream that they're trying to buy, then we can send that out to everybody. Help their shopping greatly.
Yeah. And so thinking of buying our dreams, that just makes me think about, I've had some people, they don't want to do outfitting because it's too expensive. Or they don't want to go with an outfitter because it's too expensive. So do you have any tips or suggestions for them, like how they could budget or save money, or how they could afford to have their dream?
Yeah. So I think when you really, there's the hardcore do-it-yourselfer that they want, part of their experience is that they want to experience I did it. I did it all. I set my tent. I picked my spot. I did this. And that's those. They're not going to be shopping for outfitters. The ones that you're referring to that go, it's so expensive, I can't do it. I think they need to start shopping a little more, because there actually are very reasonably priced services, or potentially portions of services that they may not actually know they want or need. It can be as simple as a pack out service for game. It enables a do-it-yourselfer to go farther in and be able to harvest and transport their game out in a way that there's less waste. It's easier, more efficient, less heartache, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's that something you saying that just makes me think of how many people I've met on the trail that were maybe from back east and had only hunted whitetail. And not Minnesota whitetail that are big like our mule deer, but small whitetail. And they've got an elk down and they're in a panic because they're used to just picking them up and hauling them out whole. And so that's something, talking about a pack out, to get an outfitter to come. You can learn how to break down the animal, or you can pay that outfitter or their guide, whoever it is, to come and break that animal down for you, field dress it, and pack it out. And that is huge. And I know a lot of older men that have blown out their backs and stuff, and now they will call an outfitter to come pack out for them because they've worked too hard when they were doing it themselves and they're younger.
And they still don't, they still don't want to, whichever type of do-it-yourselfer they are, they're not ready to bite the bigger bullets. That you can look into drop camp outfitters that have, I don't want to downplay it, but a camp set up, and you go in, hunt on their own, and they show up the last day. They have, the agreement is that when you get something down, you get it back to camp, and they pack it out of camp. Those are reasonably priced. I think that the higher end outfitted stuff kind of takes the gloss and the focus of a lot of things. So the cost is probably misunderstood by a lot of general public, that there are reasonable things to pay for that are not the once in a lifetime thing. It's something that normal people can do, and that it's a reasonable price, and for the services rendered, it makes their life easier and oftentimes more successful.
Right. And actually, that type of a camp will also save you money, because you're not having to go buy the tent. You're not having to go buy all that gear that you're going to use once a year, maybe. And I actually have some friends that they bought canvas tents and everything to have like an outfitter style camp, and they use it once a year and have spent a ton of money on that, where it's like you could just have spent a little money and and actually now they're not using it. So
and outfitter pick it up in the classifieds.
Might be for sale soon. Yeah. Keep an eye on the ads. So thinking of that, I mean, you have a lot of gear, and then do you guys run a few different guides, or is it just you and Jeff that are running everything?
So in our personal business right now, it's all family run. We we actually can operate with 2 to 3 employees. 3 to 4 is nice. And then we've got stock upwards of 30 that will rotate in and out as they work. For our main operation, our stock are our main employees. We personally stopped doing fully guided. We did fully guided and semi-guided for 25 years. And through lots of various choices and decision making, both because of wildlife and high success rates, frankly, our guides all like, the hard thing about guides is they show up like just before the season and sit down at dinner, and we're all kind of catching up what's going on, this and that. And so as soon as somebody goes, I met a girl, I start going,
Oh no.
congratulations. I'm happy for them. They're, but then that kind of goes on, and it's like, okay, now they're married, now they have kids, and you call them up in this winter and spring during marketing season. You go, okay, I got second and third. This is what's going on. These are the people that I'm thinking of signing you, blah, blah, blah. And that's when they go, oh, we're going to Disneyland second. And you go, okay, great. The skill set is not as many people for our type of operation, especially. General public doesn't ride horses. All of our stuff is wilderness. It's pack in, pack out. You have to have that. You have to have a local knowledge of the area that is strong, and that makes us comfortable saying, hey, this is so and so, he's going to be your guide. We didn't just write him in here on Wednesday. Thank you for your money. But we made some decisions, and we now run full drop camp. We put a lot of bells and whistles on our personal stuff, so that I think they're really good. And we want to maintain a level of customer service that enables our hunters to be very successful without overblowing the available wildlife and overstressing the resource of whatever dirt, flower, fauna, whatever, that we're as light on the area and on the game and in general as we can be, so that everybody gets to go in and still pretend like there's at least a point that you feel you're new there and that it's been you alone. And that's
something that
priceless.
you talking about managing wildlife. I've talked to a few outfitters that are actually a lot of outfitters that are really focused on the management of wildlife. And can you explain to our audience? I think a lot of people think that outfitters just go help people kill animals. I'm not sure what they think.
Yeah.
Maybe my listeners can email me or message me and let me know what you guys think of outfitters. But can you explain to my listeners the importance of why it's so important to an outfitter to manage the game?
Specific to Colorado, whether it's private land or public land, right? We have geographic boundaries that we can offer services in. And within that area, we don't, unless there's high fence, which there are a few, but within areas that are fair chase, be those private or public, the game will come and go at the game's will, at the game's need for feed, water, gender, need for sanctuary from pressures of recreation, a lot of things, because we only are able to operate within the paradigms of space, time, and type of service. And that's public as well as private. There's constraints on both sides if you want to have longevity. Just like generalized statewide or nationwide wildlife management, if we as operators are not watching that on a drainage basis or a basin basis, or even as broad as data analysis units, where we're lumping in GMUs and what's happening kind of in our neighboring areas, you're not going to be successful very long. Guided, to be blunt, like in our operation, we recognized that we could not sustain 50 to 100% success rates on guided hunts at levels that were paying the mortgage and allowing us to eventually feed a teenage boy and those kind of things, we had to back off on that because the game wasn't able to replenish itself as quickly. You have to take into those ideals and what your thought process is on if you're going to hunt this year, what you're going to do, when you're going to hunt it next year, if it's going to be in 5 years. That can come down to a guide level where you give guide directives to this is what we're looking for, and you're going to turn down this. We're not going to just maybe you dissuade people from hunting cows. Maybe you dissuade people from hunting does. Maybe there's means of take. Maybe there's timing in seasons, age classes, numbers of groups. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But if you're not taking that into account, you're not going to be successful. It's especially in the long term. And I think ultimately and ethically, as an outfitter and as a hunter, I'm always looking at what I'm almost more of what I'm leaving behind than what I'm taking. Just like a checkbook. I need it for later.
An investment there.
I need it for later. I want it there for my kids. I want it there for future generations. And you have to make those decisions. You have to make them in our realm. You have to make them on a business basis.
Yeah. And it seems like a lot of the outfitters, you guys are out there more than even somebody who's a passionate hunter. I mean, they're out there for the season or whatever tag they drew, and that maybe they go scouting too. But a lot of them are only out there for that general time, where you all are out there for the entire season from September to now the end of November. I don't even know the seasons anymore. They've changed so much. But you're out there more, and you mentioned like saying limiting cow take or something like that. I think that's when I first met you, was several years ago when we were talking about limiting the take of cows in our area. And with that, you said you've been the president of the Outfitters Association for a few years now. Is it the management of the wildlife that got you into the advocacy, or was it becoming the president that got you into the advocacy for wildlife?
No, advocacy's always been there because it's just kind of part of it's a household ethic. I'll put it that way. If you're not watching out for that, and you don't have, if that's not your first thought in all of these situations, we've been on a kill, and it's so often to say it's such a beautiful animal. And literally since the very first time I was on a kill, my first thought was, well, it was a beautiful animal. Now it's working me. And not to degrade the beauty of it, it was kind of my mindset. And that's followed through. Married somebody that has the same mindset. We're like, no, now it's working me. There's a respect and a reverence there, but you have to respect and think about them alive, as well as what happens after harvest. Treating it like meat, like you're going to eat that. What's it going to taste like? Is it clean? Is it any of those things? And that has to go on. Like I said, that's how you go on to the future generations. You got to make sure that they're there and that you teach those reverence. I feel like I'm talking like some sort of tribal generation thing. And I'm certainly not really that spiritual, but I am aware. And I think it's just the advocacy thing for me it's just part of it. It has to be. And I think that is, if we look back over 150 years and look at the North American model and go, this is what brought back the game that we're hunting today. If we're always kind of circling back on that we've already been in the bad places, let's do better. And that means you have to be an advocate. And you have to, sometimes that means you have to stand up to your peers and your other hunters and go, hang on a minute. I know you may not like what I'm saying because it might be something that is hindering your today, but what does that mean tomorrow and next week and next year and 5 years down the road? And that just is that.
Yeah. So what are some of the key issues? I mean, I encourage people all the time to look to an outfitter or a guide because you're guiding them in their hunt. I mean, in the whole process. But what are some other things as far as in Colorado, some other things that are super important right now that you think my listeners should know about? I mean, are there any outfitter details or, I mean, you can talk about wolves or whatever you want to talk about. They've heard a lot about wolves on my podcast, let me tell you.
So
and
I think
Jenny was on the stakeholder advisory group for the wolf introduction for you all that are listening. So, but I don't know what's the key issue right now that you think people should know about?
I think my observation on the key issue is it's certainly, and it's very, very it's very exaggerated in Colorado, but it actually is primarily a Western states issue. And that is a philosophical change from the non-hunting public to want rewilding, to want management to effectively completely change as we know it, understand it, and are comfortable with it today. And that kind of whittles down to management versus non-management. Now, when I say management, I think of hunters and hunting being the main tool, both for fundraising and financing, but also for population controls and being able to allow the door open for growth or close the door and bring the populations down. And we're seeing it all over the West. And you know this because you participate on a broad range and in a broad geographic scope. And there are presses everywhere to either completely stop predator hunting in entirety, to reintroduce, like the wolf, grizzly, bring in more predators where they were extirpated previously, and ultimately get to a point. And these people I can say from my heart, they have a beautiful vision. Like everything is natural. It just takes humans out of the picture as if we have no effect, or as if our presence is only in a hunting or non-hunting specific place. And that's not real. We have town bears. We have lions that are attacking children in Carbondale. We have predator conflict nationwide. And yet we don't have a lot of tools that are available to monitor that other than, in some instances, agency personnel. And as hunters by population or stretch or scope don't participate, age out or whatever, we're going to even lose the skill sets that are moving into the agency. So ultimately, if they get their way and predators are the only management tool and everything rebalances as they believe it would, when there is human conflict with anything, we will be also looking at a dwindling skill set within agency capabilities. And because kids aren't doing it, teens aren't doing it, it's going to be a big loss. And there's going to be, sadly, bigger problems because we can't stop the conflict that's going to happen. They're just because the animals are just living their lives.
Yeah, the animals will always do what they know how to do, whether that is a predator that's trying to attack and get food, or it's the prey animals, ungulates and such that are just trying to survive. So that part is going to always be, and then we're just in their space, in the middle of it.
Even when we're not hunting.
Yeah. And that's the majority of it, is the people that are not hunting are in the middle of all of it. So
yeah.
What do you think for my listeners? Is there anything they can do, or do you have any suggestions, topics that they should? I mean, they're listening to the podcast, so I mean, that's something they can do. But as far
Yes.
as activating, what do you suggest or recommend?
Reach out. First of all, almost all of us as hunters are um, somehow involved in various advocacy organizations, whether that's outfitting associations, SCI, RMEF, National Wild Turkey, Wildlife Confederation, and you name it. There's a whole plethora of groups to each other. The ones that you're involved with, find out what their kind of advocacy protocols are, what their missions are as far as wildlife management and the politics of it. Know what they are so that you know what your money's doing. That's a first stage. It's easy to do from your home. It's easy to do from work. And a lot of us don't necessarily understand some of those places that our money's being used or how it can be used by those groups. They all do great work. It's just we may not understand what it is. So if we think they're doing something, they may or may not be. The second one is get involved at any level in your local wildlife politics. Roundtables, public meetings, commission meetings are fantastic. Going and talking to your local legislators about how hunting is important to you and why, and what you need or what can preserve it. The hardest thing about wildlife advocacy right now is we are by number, we are a small group. We are small. We cast an incredibly large shadow. And it's difficult, though, when you can have the wolf. There were 732 West Slope comments. 732 for an apex predator that's going to be delivered to the West Slope and has an effect on everybody directly or indirectly eventually, and is one of the most profound wildlife changes to come in decades. And only 732 people cared enough to say something.
Yeah, it's easy to think that someone else is speaking for you. And apparently there were a lot of people that thought someone else was speaking for them in that comment period.
Well, and even when there is, that's kind of my thought. My big thought is, and you and I have been at many, many commission meetings together, is one of us can speak. And while in my role, I may be representing the 932 licensed outfitters in the state, if I'm in that capacity making comment, it's still me standing there. And I may or may not have a smattering of hats behind me or camo behind me that participate. And that is far and away the place where we're holding the line, but we're not gaining ground. Because they don't, our little 4 or 5% of the population is still talking to 95% of the population, and it's easy to get drowned out.
Yeah, definitely. Woo. It definitely is. And I would like to encourage people to get involved, even if it is just on a local level, because I know that Jenny has gone through it, but it gets tiring and it's exhausting. And we have lives, but I have people thank me all the time. And at first it used to make me angry that they would thank me because I'm like, well, you should just do something. But then I learned to okay, well, you're welcome. But then also it's like, I'm tired, guys. Somebody else needs to help carry the weight. And it seems like there's such a small number that are advocating. So I wish more people would do more as much as you can.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And you and I have talked about this, the aging factor and wear and tear on yourself when it feels like there is a continual press to, I look at it, there's certainly, especially on outfitting, because there's many people that are vocal that believe, I can go talk about my business and it's like, again, it becomes me and I, but ultimately I'm also representing the 60 or 80 hunters that I provide services to annually and helping advocate for them and making them answerable and bringing in the extra micromanaging aspect of the wildlife in our area. That happens, but we don't talk about that as well. We are not good about pressing that message. So we get to be just the prostitute killer or the grumpy guy at the trailhead that, oh, by the way, they had 2 flat tires this morning. Somebody's already yelled at them and they've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning. And now it's, I'm sorry, we were grumpy. But it's kind of odd, but you also go, we all just kind of need to talk to each other and recognize that our ultimate goal is that we want to maintain wildlife. We want to maintain the ability to harvest wildlife. And we want to control the populations ultimately so we don't have the conflict in the urban, municipal, and suburban areas that we do. It's not healthy for whether they be prey or predator. It's not healthy for them, and it's not healthy for humans. And maybe we're full. I don't want to say that, but I do. But we might be full. And if we're such a minority and we think that 1 or 2 people are speaking for us, they don't understand how big that shadow is. And they don't understand it's really hard to get that message out that ultimately you will sacrifice something for yourself to make something better for the greater ideals.
Yeah.
And
I think that's something a lot of people could learn is that sacrifice. And it seems like we've become such a self-satisfying society and in instant gratification and all of that. And I think for my listeners, it's something that we all should look at. And I have to check myself sometimes and, just step back and be like, wait a second.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So with the outfitters, while you guys, I mean, you're conserving, you're advocating, you're helping people build their dreams.
Yes.
For my listeners, will you let them know either where they can find you or where they can find the Outfitters Association or whatever locations you would like to share with them?
So you can find us or me through www.coloradooutfitters.org. You can also call the office at 970-824-2468. I am in the field, and like today, I want to talk about outfitters in general. I obviously have me and I because I am me and I. But if you Google me, you'll find me. So I'm not going to put a plug in there for my own individual stuff. But really, outfitters, that's the easiest way. If you are from out of state or looking for outfitters associations, Google your outfitters association. You can also POGA, Professional Outfitters and Guides of America, now has their website live. And I would quote that, but I don't have it. So Google it and it shows up. Because I don't have it memorized yet.
So for my listeners, I'll let you know.
I'm the vice chair, but I don't have the website.
But yeah, it's hard to remember all of the websites. But for my listeners, I'll put the links in the show notes to everything that Jenny is referring to, as well as some of the past episodes that correlate with topics that Jenny's talked about. So you can find them there as well as on my website, which is Anstine.com. So thank you for joining me, Jenny. I hope that the listeners are learned
always a pleasure.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.